When I first walked into Greystone Marketing, I had no idea that one decision, one job offer, would change everything I thought I knew about myself, about love, and about the people we trust. I was 26, newly graduated, nervous but eager. The office was sleek, full of confident people who walked with the kind of certainty I had only ever dreamed of. My palms were sweaty as I adjusted my file and waited outside the glass-walled cabin of Miss Laura Bennett, the managing director. Everyone talked about her in a tone mixed with fear and admiration. She's brilliant but tough. Never cross her. She built this company from the ground up. When she called me in, her voice was calm, low, and commanding. "Emma Collins?" she asked, not looking up from her screen. "Yes, ma'am," I managed, standing straight even though my heart was pounding. When she finally did look up, her eyes caught me off guard, steady, intelligent, and a little too observant. She scanned me like she was reading an entire story written on my face. Then, for the briefest moment, she smiled. "Sit down," she said. "Let's see what you can bring to my table." That was the beginning. I got the job. My official title was personal assistant to the managing director, which sounded glamorous but meant long hours, endless schedules, and a constant effort to keep up with Laura's pace. She was 38, elegant, and always perfectly composed, a woman who never seemed to lose control. I admired her instantly. Everyone did. But admiration slowly turned into something I couldn't name Dot in those first few weeks. I noticed how she noticed me. Not in a loud or obvious way. It was the quiet moments that said the most. The way her eyes softened when she saw me struggling with files. The way she'd ask, "Have you eaten?" after a long meeting. Or how her tone changed from sharp to gentle whenever she spoke my name Dot at first. I told myself she was just a kind boss, a professional who valued her employees. But soon, small moments started to blur the lines. Once, when I accidentally spilled coffee near her desk, I panicked. "I'm so sorry, ma'am." I rushed to clean it up, expecting her anger. But she just knelt down beside me, her perfume surrounding me, her hand brushing mine as she reached for the napkin. "It's okay, Emma," she said quietly, her voice almost warm. "You're too hard on yourself." Her words stayed with me longer than they should have. Every day after that, I became more aware of her. The way she'd look out the window between calls, lost in thought. The faint lines near her eyes when she smiled. The quiet sigh she'd let out after a long meeting. I wanted to understand her, not as my boss, but as a person, and I think that's when it began for her too. The office was full of whispers. People noticed she treated me differently. She'd call me in for meetings that others could handle, ask my opinion on projects beyond my role, even defend me when someone questioned my work. One of my colleagues once teased, "Looks like you're the favorite now." "Emma," I laughed it off, pretending not to care, but inside, I was confused. It wasn't favoritism. It felt like something softer, deeper, something I wasn't ready to name. One late evening, I was the last to leave the office. I remember the soft hum of the air conditioner, the rain tapping against the windows, and the golden light from her cabin still glowing. She was sitting at her desk, head in her hands, tired. When she saw me, she straightened up. "You're still here?" she asked. "I was just finishing the report you asked for," I said, holding the folder out. She smiled faintly. "You didn't have to stay this late." I shrugged. "It's okay. I like working here." Her gaze lingered, not unkindly, just searching. Like she wanted to say something but didn't. That was the first time. I noticed the silence between us wasn't awkward anymore. It was heavy. The next morning, during a staff meeting, someone from another department blamed me for a scheduling error that wasn't mine. My throat tightened. I could feel eyes on me, the humiliation rising. Before I could even defend myself, Laura stood up. "That's enough," she said, her voice sharp. "If anyone here has a problem, bring it to me directly. Emma is doing her job better than most of you." The room went silent. My heart pounded in my chest. She looked at me afterward, not with pride, but with something almost protective. Later, when I thanked her privately, she simply said, "You don't owe me thanks. Emma, I just don't like seeing you hurt." Her words sank deep. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something behind her professionalism, a feeling she wasn't ready to admit. And when I wasn't ready to understand Dot as days passed, I began to notice how her mood shifted depending on mine. If I was quiet, she'd ask, "Everything okay?" If I smiled, she relaxed. If I seemed stressed, she'd subtly rearrange my workload to ease my day. But I didn't know then that her care came from a place much deeper than kindness. Looking back, I realized everyone else saw it before I did. The way she looked at me, the softness in her tone, the way she tried to protect me from the world, but never herself did at that time. I was too naive to see it, too focused on proving myself, too unaware that beneath her strictness and grace, there was a storm of emotions she kept locked away. That evening, as I walked out of the office with files in my hands and 100 thoughts in my head, I glanced through the glass door and saw her watching me leave, her face unreadable, her eyes full of something I couldn't define. I smiled politely and waved, not knowing what that look truly meant. If I had known then what I know now, maybe things would have been different, but that night, I simply told myself, she's just being kind. She's just my boss. I didn't know that her kindness was love, disguised in silence. After that meeting where Laura defended me, something between us quietly changed, not in words, not in action, but in the energy that existed whenever we were in the same room. She started spending more time with me. At first, it was purely work-related. She'd call me into her cabin for planning sessions or ask me to stay late for client meetings. But slowly, work began to fade into conversation. It began one afternoon when the office was quieter than usual. I was sitting in her cabin, helping her prepare slides for a presentation. She leaned back in her chair, sighed, and said softly, "Do you ever get tired, Emma?" I looked up, surprised. "Tired?" "Yes," she said, staring at her computer screen, but not really looking at it. "Of pretending you're fine all the time." I wasn't sure what to say. The question came from somewhere deep, too personal for a boss to ask, too gentle to ignore. "I think everyone does," I said carefully. "We just learn to hide it." She smiled faintly. "You're wiser than you look." That was the first real conversation we had, not about deadlines or meetings, but about life. From that day on, there were more of them. She'd ask about my family, my college days, what I liked to read. Sometimes she'd share bits about herself, how she had been married once, but it didn't last. How her parents never really understood her choices. How she had built her success out of loneliness. I listened, always quietly, afraid to interrupt her vulnerability. There was something sacred about those moments, like she was trusting me with pieces of herself that no one else got to see. And every time she spoke, I felt this invisible thread pulling me closer to her. The office started noticing too. People whispered when they saw us having coffee together, or when she laughed at something I said, something she never did with others. One of my colleagues, Mark, smirked once and said, "Emma, looks like you've got the boss wrapped around your finger." I laughed it off, pretending it didn't bother me, but inside it did. I didn't understand what they were implying. Lavra was my boss, strict, brilliant, respected. Yes, we were close, but not like that. Not in the way they thought at least. That's what I told myself. But sometimes when we were working late, I'd catch her looking at me, not the way a boss looks at an employee, but the way someone looks when they're trying not to feel something. Her gaze would linger a second too long. Her voice would soften when she said my name, and I'd feel my heartbeat quicken for reasons I couldn't explain. That one night, it rained heavily. Everyone had left early, but Laura and I stayed behind to finish a project. The power flickered, the office lights dimmed. The city outside was blurred behind sheets of rain. "Let's call it a night," she said finally, shutting her laptop. "I'll drop you home." I hesitated. "No, it's okay. I can get a cab." She looked at me, her tone firm but kind. "It's late, Emma. Let me drive you." I didn't argue. The ride was quiet. The wipers moved rhythmically against the windshield, the faint sound of rain and soft piano music filling the silence. She drove carefully, her face calm, her hands steady on the wheel. I watched her for a moment, the faint reflection of the streetlights on her skin, the way her eyes softened whenever she glanced at me through the mirror. She asked suddenly, "Do you ever feel lonely, Emma?" The question caught me off guard. Sometimes, I admitted, but I try not to think about it. She nodded. "That's what I used to do too, until it started feeling normal." Her voice had a heaviness I couldn't ignore. I wanted to ask what she meant, but I stayed quiet. The moment felt fragile, like one wrong word could shatter it. When we stopped at a red light, she turned to me. For a second, our eyes met, and it felt like time paused. There was no boss and employee in that moment, just two women sitting in the soft glow of rain and silence, carrying feelings neither of them could name. I looked away first, pretending to check my phone. My chest felt tight, my thoughts spinning. What was happening between us? Why did her silence feel so loud? When we reached my street, I thanked her quietly. "You didn't have to, but thank you." She gave a small smile. I wanted to. I stepped out of the car, holding my bag close, and she waited until I got inside the building before driving away. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the drive in my head, her voice, the rain, that moment of eye contact. It felt like something invisible had shifted between us, something unspoken but real. I sat by my window, watching the rain fall, whispering to myself, "Don't overthink it. She's your boss. It's nothing more than kindness," but deep down, I knew that wasn't true. There was something else in the way she looked at me, something she was trying to hide but couldn't completely. I pressed my forehead against the glass and let out a slow breath. "I felt something that night," I whispered, but I buried it because it didn't make sense to me. I didn't know what love felt like then, not this kind of love. Not the kind that grows quietly in the space between two people who were never supposed to cross paths. But Lavra, I think she already knew. Everything between us changed because of one message, one meaningless, ordinary message that carried the weight of everything we never said. It was a Friday afternoon. The office was alive with the usual end-of-week energy, laughter echoing from the marketing wing, people planning dinners and weekends. I was at my desk, tired but content, when a message popped up on my phone. It was from Ryan, a coworker from accounting. "You did great on that pitch today. Coffee's on me next week." It was harmless, friendly. I smiled, typed a quick, "Thanks, sure," and went back to work. But when I looked up, I saw Laura standing near the hallway, her eyes on me. She must have seen the notification light up on my screen. The expression on her face wasn't anger. It was something else. A flicker of emotion, quickly buried under that calm, professional mask she wore so well. She turned and walked back into her cabin without a word. That was the beginning of the silence. Over the next few days, Laura changed. The warmth in her tone disappeared. Her eyes, once filled with quiet kindness, now seemed cold and unreadable. The coffee breaks stopped. The small smiles vanished. She started correcting me in meetings, harshly, publicly. "Emma, this isn't what I asked for. This report is full of errors." You need to start taking your work seriously. Each word hit harder than the last. I wanted to ask what I had done wrong, but I couldn't find the courage. The woman who once confided in me now barely looked at me, Dot. I spent nights going over every detail, every word, every gesture, trying to understand what changed. Did I disappoint her? Did I say something wrong? The office felt different too. People noticed the tension. The same coworkers who once whispered about our closeness now smirked about our distance. Looks like the favorite fell out of favor. I overheard one of them say, Dot, it hurt more than I could admit. I tried to talk to her once. I knocked on her door after hours when the office was empty. She was sitting by the window, papers scattered around, a soft light illuminating her face. Ms. Lavra, I said quietly, do you have a minute? She didn't look up. What is it, Emma? I just wanted to know if I did something wrong. My voice trembled despite my best effort to sound calm. You've been different lately, distant. If I made a mistake, please tell me. I'll fix it. She finally looked at me then, and for a second, her eyes softened. But she looked away just as quickly. You didn't do anything wrong, she said. You just need to focus on your work. Her words sounded like a wall, tall, cold, and impossible to climb. I left her cabin that night with tears in my eyes. Still not knowing what I was apologizing for, days turned into weeks. The silence between us grew heavier, sharper. Sometimes I'd catch her watching me from her office window when she thought I wasn't looking. Other times, she'd walk past me in the hallway like I didn't exist. I started dreading going to work, not because of the workload, but because of the emptiness. The woman who once made the office feel alive now made it feel unbearable. Then came the day I'll never forget, Dot. It was late evening. The office almost empty. I was packing up when her voice came from behind me, calm, distant, formal. Emma, can you come to my office for a minute? I walked in, my heart pounding. She stood by the window, her back to me, arms folded. The city lights reflected on the glass behind her. I think it's time we end your position here, she said without turning around. I froze. What? She turned then, her expression unreadable. You've been doing great work, but I don't think this is the right fit anymore. I'll arrange your final settlement and recommendation letter by tomorrow. I couldn't breathe. Ms. Laura, please. What's going on? Did I do something? Tell me, and I'll fix it. Just don't. It's better this way, Emma, she interrupted softly, her eyes glistening for a fraction of a second. You'll understand someday. Her voice cracked at the end, so faintly that I almost missed it. I stepped closer. No, I won't understand, I said, tears forming in my eyes. You said I didn't do anything wrong. So why are you doing this? She looked away. Because I have to. I waited, hoping she'd explain, that she'd say something, anything, that would make this make sense. But she didn't. She stood there, perfectly composed. Even as her eyes betrayed the storm inside, I left her office in a blur of tears, my heart breaking in ways I couldn't describe. The elevator ride down felt endless. My mind kept replaying her words. It's better this way. That night, I sat on my bed staring at the resignation letter she'd already prepared for me. My hands trembled as I traced her signature at the bottom, neat, confident, final. I cried for hours, not just because I lost my job, but because I lost something I couldn't name. Something fragile, beautiful, and half-formed, something that never got the chance to be real. I didn't understand it then. I thought she fired me because I wasn't good enough, because I disappointed her, because maybe she saw me as a mistake, but years later, when I look back, I know the truth. She didn't fire me for my mistake. She fired me because she loved me, and I didn't know. The morning after I was fired felt like waking up in a world where everything had lost its sound. My phone was silent. My inbox empty. The rhythm that used to fill my days, Laura's meetings, her messages, her voice calling my name from across the hall. All of it was gone. For the first few days, I kept checking my phone, half expecting a message from her. Maybe she'd say it was all a misunderstanding, that she had acted in haste. But no message ever came. I tried to move on, applied for new jobs, updated my resume, told my friends I was fine. But every time I sat in an interview, every time someone asked, "Why did you leave your last position?" my voice trembled. How could I explain that I didn't leave? I was pushed away by the one person I never wanted to lose. At night, I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying everything, her laughter, her eyes, her voice. It wasn't just missing a job. It was missing her. Missing the way she said my name. Missing the silent comfort that came from just sitting across her desk, hearing the sound of her typing, knowing I was part of her world. I didn't realize how much of my life had begun to revolve around her until she was gone. One evening, unable to stand the silence of my apartment, I walked aimlessly through the city. It was raining again, the kind of soft rain that makes everything look like a memory. I stopped near the old coffee shop where we sometimes went after long meetings. The table near the window was empty, the one where she used to sit. Stirring her coffee while asking about my plans for the weekend, I stood outside for a long time, watching the rain fall, watching the reflection of that empty table. That's when it hit me. What I had felt all along wasn't admiration. It wasn't gratitude. It was love. Not the kind of love I'd known before, the kind that demands or expects. This was different. It was quiet, gentle, almost sacred. It had grown slowly without my realizing, between long silences and unspoken words, and she had loved me too. I could see it now, in every glance, every hesitation, every time she tried to distance herself and failed, but she never said it. She never gave me a chance to understand, to feel it fully. I whispered into the night, if she had told me once, just once, that she loved me, I wouldn't have walked away. I would have stayed. I meant it. I would have stayed no matter what anyone said, no matter what it cost. Because losing her hurt more than anything else could. Weeks passed and life continued in slow motion. I found a small job at another firm, nothing special, nothing close to what I had before. The office was quiet, the people polite. But every time I saw a woman in a crisp white shirt and heels, I felt my heart twist painfully. Every time I smelled her perfume, that faint, expensive scent of jasmine and wood, it was like being pulled back into her office. Into those evenings when she'd stand beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her presence. Sometimes I'd dream about her. In those dreams, she'd call my name softly, like she used to, and I'd turn to find her standing there, calm, beautiful, untouchable. And just when I'd reach for her, I'd wake up, the emptiness heavier than before. I tried to tell myself it would fade with time, but it didn't. It only grew quieter, the kind of ache that settles in your chest and learns to live there. What I didn't know then was that Lavra was breaking to Dot through whispers from old coworkers. I later learned that she stopped going to lunch meetings, that her temper worsened, that she started avoiding everyone. Some said she looked lost. Others said she'd grown colder. Nobody knew why, but I knew. I could imagine her sitting alone in that big office, the blinds half drawn, the world still moving outside, wondering if she had done the right thing. I could imagine her staring at my empty desk, pretending it didn't hurt. I could almost hear her voice saying, "It's better this way." But I knew it wasn't. Not for her. Not for me. We were two people living in the same silence, miles apart. Sometimes I'd write her letters I never sent. Letters filled with everything I couldn't say while I was there. How much I admired her. how she made me want to be better, how her smile made ordinary days feel special. And in the end, I'd always write the same line. You should have told me, Lavra. I would have understood. I would have stayed. One night, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea gone cold, the city lights flickering below. I thought about her. Maybe she was still working late. Maybe she was looking at the same sky. I imagined her hand resting on her desk, her mind lost in the same memories that haunted me. And for the first time, I cried, not the quiet kind of tears that fall in shame, but the deep, helpless sobs of someone who has finally understood what they've lost. The truth was simple and cruel. She fired me not to hurt me, but to save herself. And in doing so, she broke us both. I used to think silence was strength, that the things we don't say protect us. But now I knew better. Silence kills more love than hatred ever will. And as I sat there, staring into the night, I whispered one last time, if she had told me once, just once, that she loved me, I wouldn't have walked away. I would have stayed. It had been nearly 6 months since I'd last seen Laura. Time had moved on, but my heart hadn't. I had learned to survive, to smile in meetings, to talk to new colleagues, to laugh when expected. But beneath it all, something inside me remained frozen in that moment. The moment she said, "It's better this way." One gray afternoon, while waiting in line at a small cafe, I heard a familiar name. A woman sitting 2 tables away was speaking softly to someone on the phone. Yes, Laura finally resigned. She's leaving next week. My heart stopped. Laura resigned? Leaving? Before I even realized, I was walking toward her. "Excuse me," I said nervously. "Did you just say Laura Bennett?" She looked up, startled, then smiled politely. "Yes, do you know her?" I used to work for her," I stammered. Her eyes softened. "You must be Emma?" The way she said my name felt like a blow. How do you know me?" She hesitated, then gestured for me to sit. "I'm Claire. Laura and I went to university together. We've known each other for almost 15 years. She used to talk about you. A lot." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "She talked about me?" Claire nodded. "More than she realized. She admired you deeply, your energy, your honesty, your kindness. But it was more than admiration, Emma. She loved you." The words hit me like lightning. My coffee cup trembled in my hands. "Loved me?" I whispered. Claire nodded slowly, her expression kind but heavy. She was terrified of her own feelings. You have to understand, Laura had built her entire reputation on being strong, controlled, untouchable. The youngest woman to become regional director, respected by everyone in her field. But she was also alone. She'd been through years of judgment just for being who she was, a woman who didn't fit into the boxes people wanted her to. I sat there frozen, my mind replaying every memory, the looks, the silences, the firing. It all began to make sense now, like pieces of a painful puzzle finally falling into place. Claire continued softly. When she realized how she felt about you, she panicked. She thought if anyone found out, you'd become the target of office gossip, whispers, rumors, even professional sabotage. She didn't want that for you. And she knew she couldn't control her emotions anymore. So she decided to protect you the only way she knew how, by letting you go. My eyes filled with tears. "By firing me," I said broken lie. Claire nodded, her voice gentle. "She cried for weeks after you left. She told me it was the hardest thing she'd ever done. She said she'd rather destroy her own peace than let you suffer because of her." I covered my face with my hands, trying to hold back the sob that escaped my throat. All this time, I had thought she hated me, that I had done something wrong. I had hated myself for not understanding. But now Now I saw it clearly. She had loved me silently, punished herself loudly, and left quietly. When I finally looked up, Claire reached across the table and squeezed my hand. She talked about moving abroad, somewhere peaceful, far away from everything. She wanted a fresh start. Did she ever, did she ever plan to tell me? I asked weakly. Claire shook her head. No, she said you deserve someone free, not someone trapped by fear and reputation. She loved you enough to let you think she didn't? That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by my window, staring at the city lights, thinking about her, Laura Bennett, the woman who had loved me in silence and destroyed herself in the process. I thought of the way she used to look at me when she thought I wasn't watching, the way her voice softened whenever she said my name, the hesitation in her eyes when she fired me, the pain she tried so hard to hide. Now it all made sense. Every cold glance, every harsh word, they weren't anger. They were protection. I opened my drawer and took out the old letter I had once started writing but never finished. That night, I completed it. Dear Laura, I finally know the truth. You didn't fire me because I failed. You fired me because you loved me and because you were afraid of what the world would say. I wish you had told me just once. I wouldn't have judged you. I wouldn't have run away. You spent years protecting everyone, the company, your image, your strength, but you forgot to protect yourself. And in the process, you broke something inside both of us. You taught me so many things. How to stand tall, how to work hard, how to fight for what I believe in. But the one thing you couldn't teach me was how to forget you. If love ever finds you again, I hope it's kind. I hope it lets you speak without fear. And if you ever think of me, I hope you remember not the day you fired me, but the days when we were still unbroken. With love, Emma. When I finished the letter, I didn't send it. I folded it carefully and placed it inside my journal, a confession to a woman who might never read it. A week later, I went back to our old office building. It looked smaller somehow, quieter. Her nameplate was gone from the door, the blinds drawn. Someone new sat at her desk now, tapping away at the keyboard. I stood there for a while, watching, feeling like a ghost in a place that once felt like home. As I turned to leave, I whispered one last time, "Goodbye, Lara." It wasn't the kind of goodbye that ends something. It was the kind that sets it free. Because now I understood love isn't always about holding on. Sometimes it's about letting go with grace. Even when it tears you apart, she had loved me silently, punished herself loudly, and left quietly. And that's how I would remember her, the woman who taught me that silence can be both the purest form of love and the cruelest form of loss. Years have passed, but sometimes it still feels like yesterday. I'm 32 now, older, calmer, maybe wiser. But every once in a while, when the evening light touches my face the way it used to spill through her office blinds, I feel it again, the quiet ache of what never became. People often say time heals everything. Maybe that's true. But what they don't tell you is that some wounds don't need healing. They just need understanding. That's what Laura's memory became for me. Not a scar, not even a pain, just a quiet truth that still breathes somewhere inside me. I built a new life, found a new job, new colleagues, new routines. I learned how to smile without pretending. But no matter how far I went, she was always there, in the faint echo of a coffee cup placed on a desk, in the sharp click of heels in a hallway, in the way someone said my name softly. Laura. The name itself still carries warmth and ache in equal measure. For years, I carried her letter, the one I wrote but never sent, folded in my journal. Sometimes on sleepless nights, I would take it out, unfold it, and read those words again. It reminded me that love doesn't always come to us in ways we understand. Sometimes it hides in silence. And sometimes that silence becomes the loudest thing we ever hear. I often wonder, what if she had told me? Just once. What if that night in the rain, when she drove me home, she had looked into my eyes and said the truth her silence kept locked away? What if, when she fired me, she had said, "I'm doing this because I love you, Emma, because I'm scared"? Would I have walked away? No, I know now that I wouldn't have. If she had told me once, just once, that she loved me, I would have stayed. I would have fought the world for her. I would have held her hand in front of every whisper, every rumor, every stare, because love, real love, is worth fighting for. And she didn't know that she was worth fighting for. Too out, maybe that's what breaks me even now. Not the goodbye, not the distance, but the silence. The silence that built walls where words could have built bridges. It took me years to understand that people hide their love not because it's weak, but because it's too strong, too fragile to expose to a cruel world. Laura wasn't weak. She was just afraid. And maybe in another time, another life, she wouldn't have been. Last week, I visited the coast, the same beach we once talked about when we worked late, tired but happy. She used to say she loved the sea because it reminded her of peace, the kind that's loud but soothing at the same time. So I went there, alone. The air was cool, the sky painted in soft pink and gray. Waves kept coming and going, like time repeating its lessons. I stood by the water, the letter still folded in my hand. I whispered to the wind, "Lavra, I hope you're happy wherever you are." Then I placed the letter in a small glass bottle and sealed it. I walked closer to the waves until the water touched my feet, cold, gentle, alive. With one deep breath, I let the bottle go. It floated away slowly, carried by the tide, small, fragile, but determined. Like love itself, I stood there watching it drift, my heart strangely calm. It felt like the closure I didn't know I needed. Like finally letting her go without losing her, because the truth is, she never really left me. She still lives in the way I care for people, and how I speak kindly even when I'm hurt, and how I pause before making decisions, remembering the woman who once taught me the power of grace. Some nights, I still dream of her sitting at her desk, looking up from her papers, that same knowing softness in her eyes. Sometimes she smiles, sometimes she doesn't, but every time, she's there, and I wake up with a strange peace, as if somewhere she's doing the same. I've stopped wishing for another ending. I no longer ask why, because maybe love isn't always about being together. Maybe it's about being changed forever, about becoming someone better because someone once saw you deeply, even if they never said it aloud. Lara changed me. She taught me that silence can hurt, but it can also mean love too deep for words. Now, when people ask if I've ever been in love, I smile and say, yes, once, with someone who never told me she loved me. They usually look confused, but I don't explain, because it's not a story everyone would understand. It's a story written in pauses, in looks, in moments that never asked to be named. As I stood by the sea that evening, watching the sun melt into the horizon, I whispered again, not in sadness, but in gratitude. Thank you, Lavra, for everything you were, and for everything you couldn't say. The wind carried my words away, maybe to her, maybe just to the waves. But I didn't need an answer. The silence was enough. And as I turned to leave, I smiled through the tears that no longer hurt, because some loves never end. They just live quietly in the corners of our hearts, where they belong, where they can stay forever, untouched by time or distance. And maybe that's the purest kind of love there is. Asterisk.